Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. Well, UFOs are being reported everywhere recently, including during a live broadcast on a Oklahoma City news channel that was doing the weather report. Something was seen. We're going to talk about that, as well as a UFO that shut down a airport in Turkey, as well as sightings everywhere. They're all over the place. It doesn't stop. It never does. It never has. Ever since 1947, we've been seeing these things, and it seems these days it's really picked up a lot. Who knows why? But anyway, let's get into this incident that happened on February 14th during a live broadcast. It was on channel KFOR out of Oklahoma City. During that feed, the weatherman noticed that there was something zooming across the sky. Here's a clip from that video.
Warmer day than we've been seeing, and one of the warmest that we're going to have on the entire 7-day forecast moving forward. Wonder what that is right there. That's pretty interesting. Moving really fast. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got here. Just interesting stuff flying around the sky. There's the live view from our 50-pen camera looking off.
Well, as you can see, there was something there, most certainly an unidentified flying object. I can't say what it is for sure, but it was most certainly interesting, and the weatherman, Brackett, thought so too, as well as did his colleagues. They did a follow-up article on February 20th about this. Let's check that out. It says here, Oklahoma City, KFOR, mysterious object spotted in the night sky during the live News 4 broadcast had viewers online buzzing about UFOs, but experts say the bright, fast-moving figure was likely something much more ordinary. Now, the experts was actually just one expert, as the article later reveals, and that expert happens to be a trained observer, which was something we were talking about in the previous episode, an astronomer. For some reason, astronomers are considered trained observers, and they know better than anybody else out there of what we might see in the sky. They could identify it better than you or me. Anyway, let's continue with this article. It says, it was just about 1 minute into News 4's 9 p.m. newscast on CW43 last Friday when forewarned storm team meteorologist Brackett walked in front of the green screen and did something he's done countless times over his 15-year career. And a lot of times, I start out with the sky cam, Brackett said. Friday, he showed a sky camera near Penn Square Mall pointing northwest. That's when something caught his eye. I start seeing this object and it's flying faster, moving faster than anything I've really observed out there, Brackett said. It's going down. It's moving really quickly. It's bright. It's got some light to it. And I kind of called attention to it. Yes, as you've seen in that little clip, he did call attention to it. And it was very strange. It looked like it was moving on horizontally, but then it looked like it moved up a little bit and then it moved back down. And then just kept on moving along on its merry old way. And then Brackett, this is from the broadcast where he says, I wonder what that is right there. Pretty interesting, moving really fast. After the newscast, Brackett and his News 4 co-workers downloaded the video and took a closer look. I immediately clipped it so that a couple of people around here could look at it in high definition and kind of rewind it, he said. We must have watched it 100 times over. And then he also posted the clip on social media. It quickly spread, making its way from social media platforms X to TikTok and Reddit, getting thousands of views and shares. Several online publications ran headlines declaring Brackett had caught a UFO live on air. Commenters on social media had their theories ranging from aliens to a bird to a plane or even a helicopter. News 4 showed the footage to Chopper 4 pilot Mason Dunn. Dunn says here, at first I thought it might be a spotlight from the ground, maybe the rotating beacon at an airport, but it just doesn't look like that to me. So I have no idea what it is. One thing he was sure of. I'm pretty confident that it wasn't a plane or a helicopter, Dunn said. That light is moving very fast, even faster than an airplane would. If it were a plane, it would have taken longer. Now, I've seen comets and things falling from the sky during the night when you're flying. Was it something from space? Nobody really knows. But astronomer Wayne Harris Wyrick doesn't think so. And here's what he had to say. He rules out a couple of things. I give him credit there, but then he says he thinks it's a bird. He says, I first start to think, is that a possible meteor because they do enter the atmosphere, or is that returning like a second stage or burnt out stage of a satellite of some kind? There's certain things you look for in both of those. It didn't fit any of those at all. No, it did not. He's completely correct about that. It does not fit the description of a meteor. I mean, this thing was moving horizontally, and it looks like it moved up and then back down again. So I can't imagine it being a meteor for sure, or a satellite. No way. No way was it a plane. No way was it a helicopter. And Friday wasn't exactly stargazing weather either. It was mostly cloudy that night, Brackett said. Harris Wyrick said that if it had been a meteor, there would have likely been other signs. You would have heard noises, and you had reports of like a typical meteor that makes a streak across the sky that lasts, a second or so, he said. You're not going to see that through clouds. Okay, that's fair enough, but you do see something there moving for sure. Anyway, the article continues. It says, this isn't the first time he's been asked to decipher a mysterious flying object caught on camera. Almost every time, he says, there's a plausible explanation. Almost every time. I like to know about the times where he doesn't think there's a plausible explanation. It doesn't get into that here, though. It says, I just think it seems unlikely to me that any aliens can fly hundreds or thousands of light years here and, do stuff like that in our sky, Harris Wyrick said. If they're going to come here, they're going to probably be invisible to us. Again, now this is all, speculation and conjecture, and there's nothing. I mean, how do you know? There's assumptions being made here, and there's no way. How do you know what they're going to do when they get here? They've been doing this for a long time, for decades. They've been flying around the sky. People have seen them, and I do agree that yes, if they do make themselves invisible, they would make themselves invisible. Apparently, that's something that they're capable of doing, as some of the evidence that we've been laying out here over the last year shows. They could make themselves invisible, obviously, but people have been seeing these objects for a long time now, and they're unearthly, to say the least. And anyway, here's what he thinks it is later on. He says, I think it's a bird. I'm guessing that camera probably has an infrared camera, which means you're going to see it differently than you would in daylight with sunlight on it. You see all the lights of the city down below. I think just getting light from the city coming up, and as it flaps its wings, which I think it's doing, you get net change of lighting pattern. Now, I looked at that video over and over and over again. I don't see any evidence of it being a bird, but that doesn't make me right. It doesn't make him right either. But he thinks, to him, right, this is a prosaic explanation. But to me, right, a prosaic explanation also should include NHI. It should also include that. There's something here. We already shown that. We already know, based on all the research and evidence and all of the reports from different people over the years, there's some presence here with us. So it is prosaic to say that it could be some sort of a craft that's operated by non-human intelligence. There's nothing wrong with saying that. That could be the prosaic explanation here too, as well, along with the bird. I don't think it is a bird, but I don't think we're ever going to know exactly what it was. But this is stuff that's been going on. It's going on all over the place right now. I was checking out the National UFO Reporting Center, and there's a lot of great cases being filed with this data bank on there. And I found this one. I thought this one was interesting. This happened in the Bahamas on February 15th. And it was in Nassau in the Bahamas, and the report here says, I was walking to the pizza place at Atlantis and I spotted a purple-colored object in the sky. As in walking to this pizza place in Atlantis, I see this purple light in the sky, then take pictures of it. That gives me a better look as I was watching it. I can see it is moving, and it leaves a bright purple-colored trail that disappears when far, but it's a close trail. And I was looking at the pictures of this thing. This is weird. There's this purple object that this guy in Nassau filmed in the Bahamas. Very strange looking. What is it? I don't know. Is it extraterrestrial / NHI? Could be. I don't know what else to say about it. It looks like it's a dark sky, dark clouds, and yet there's some sort of a purple light hovering in there. Some purple colored object. Very strange. And also recently there was an incident that occurred in Turkey at a Turkish airport. Here's an article from the Mirror. It says, flights grounded at airport over mysterious UFO sighting. Flights were suspended after pilots reported an unidentified object in the sky, with the situation is thought to be related to a UFO sighting. And it says, an airport in Turkey was thrown into chaos last night after pilot, and this was on February 19th, this article appeared. It says an airport in Turkey was thrown into chaos last night after pilots reported an unidentified illuminated object in the sky. Flights at Gaziantep Airport were suspended for about an hour as a precautionary measure after the mysterious sighting. At around 10 p.m. on February 18th, pilots spotted the UFO at an altitude of approximately 10,000 feet and reported the situation to the control tower, according to local news reports. Despite the object not appearing on radar, it was speculated that it could have been an unauthorized drone. After thorough investigations by security units, it was concluded that the object seen by the pilots could have been a drone being flown without permission. Normal service resumed at around 11 p.m. and aircraft once again permitted to take off and land. UFO enthusiasts took to Reddit to discuss the reported sighting, with one person saying, "I swear I saw this at San Francisco Airport a few weeks ago. I saw an oddly bright object pass over the hills from the direction of the ocean going east toward to the north side of the airport and just hover there. I was on the highway, so I couldn't get a good look at it, but I wondered what the hell that was. I also saw an object fly from Oakland to San Francisco in about 5 to 10 seconds. That's about 10 to 5 miles in that period of time, with no red or green lights, just a blue-colored sphere." So as you can see, these objects are being seen all over the place, and in fact, they're shutting down airports in Turkey. Another person weighed in, believing the UFO was a sign of aliens. "Open contact is definitely happening before 2027, this person reported. And it says here, earlier this year, a private jet flight crew was left stunned when they saw a UFO zigzagging through the air as their plane traveled at 45,000 feet. Florida-bound crew members have told of how they saw strange glowing orbs darting through the sky while flying high above the Bahamas. The group, flying with private carrier Surjet, said that they saw two objects darting through the skies when en route to Fort Lauderdale. So as you can see, the other thing to check out too is this National UFO Reporting Center. You can see all the reports that are continuously being filed on there. People are seeing stuff all the time. Some of the reports come with images like the one I showed you. They're just stuff being seen all over the place, and I think it needs to be pointed out. It hasn't stopped. There are still people seeing UFOs, and airports are shutting down because of it sometimes. They're even showing up now on live news feeds during the weather report. So they're everywhere, and not all the time could be a prosaic explanation be tagged onto them, I believe. I think some of these cases most certainly involves these extraterrestrials or non-human intelligent beings. That's what I believe. Doesn't make me right on all of the cases, but I think for some of them, right, I think for sure we're talking about alien creatures here. And speaking of alien creatures, I want to talk now about a famous case from 1897. Of course, we've talked about this case numerous times before, but I want to talk about it again. I've been doing some more research into it and more thought into it. I just can't imagine how anyone could have made this up back in 1897. Like a local newspaper stringer would have made a story like this. Of course, everyone knows the story here. You heard it before. Something crashed into an they say it was a windmill, but apparently it wasn't a windmill. It was a windlass that operated a sump pump for a well. That's what it crashed into. It was an 18-foot high windlass thing that operated this sump pump for a well that was on this property that was owned by a person, Judge Proctor, and but the report at the time said it destroyed a windmill, and that was a fallacy apparently in that article. And the article was written, it was published 2 days after the event. It was published on April 19th in the Dallas Morning News, and it was signed by this person named S.E. Hayden, who apparently was a local seller of cotton in the Aurora area at the time, and he would send in articles about what was going on to different newspapers, including the Dallas Morning News. And this was the article that he sent to them for this event that occurred on April 17th, and it got published on the 19th of 1897. And here it is. It says, a windmill demolishes it. Aurora, Wise County, Texas, April 17th. About 6 o'clock this morning, the early risers of Aurora were astonished at the sudden appearance of the airship which has been sailing through the country. Now, let me just stop there for a second. In the same newspaper, on the cover of that newspaper, that story was in the middle, right? And it was surrounded by 16 other articles talking about other airship sightings from Oklahoma all the way to into Texas, all all over the place, right? People were seeing this airship. It was a great airship mystery of 1896 and 1897. And apparently, on this morning of April 17th, 1897, in Aurora, Texas, one of them crashed and came down to Earth. Anyway, the article continues. It says, it was traveling due north and much nearer the Earth than ever before. Evidently, some of the machinery was out of order, for it was making a speed of only 10 or 12 miles an hour and gradually settling toward the Earth. It sailed directly over the public square, and when it reached the north part of town, collided with the tower of Judge Proctor's windmill and went to pieces with a terrible explosion, scattering debris over several acres of ground, wrecking the windmill and water tank, and destroying the judge's flower garden. The pilot of the ship is supposed to have been the only one on board, and while his remains are badly disfigured, enough of the original has been picked up to show that he was not an inhabitant of this world. Mr. T.J. Weems, the United States Signal Service officer at this place and an authority on astronomy, gives it as his opinion that he was a native of the planet Mars. Papers found on his person, evidently the record of his travels, are written in some unknown hieroglyphics and cannot be deciphered. The ship was too badly wrecked to form any conclusion as to its construction or motive power. It was built of an unknown metal resembling somewhat a mixture of aluminum and silver, and it must have weighed several tons. The town is full of people today who are viewing the wreck and gathering specimens of the strange metal from the debris. The pilot's funeral will take place at noon tomorrow, signed S.E. Hayden. And then there was another article that appeared the following day or the day after that. I'm not exactly sure. According to Jim Mars, who researched this for a good chunk of his life, he actually he researched it back in 1973 when it became big news again, and then he talked about it a lot throughout his life. He mentioned it. He wrote about it in his book here, Alien Agenda, from the late 90s. There was a documentary 2016 where he talked about it. He actually came to the belief that there was most certainly something crashed and it was alien. That was what Jim Mars finally concluded late in his life. He passed away in 2017 or 18, just a few years ago. But there was another article that he talked about that appeared in the Fort Worth Register, and in that article it said that the being was buried in the local cemetery, and that was it. So then this story sits around for all these years. People apparently in the Aurora area knew about this. There was a grave. It's been determined that, yes, there was a grave for this creature. There was a headstone that in 1973 when Jim Mars, along with this other guy, another investigator named Bill Case, who passed away in 1974, they were investigating this all over again. Actually, it became a subject in the 1960s. There were some researchers that were looking into it in the early 1970s, before 1973, around 1970. Kevin Randall, the investigator, he looked into it. He was somebody who did a lot of work on the Roswell case. But here, I've come to the conclusion that I don't think that this could have been a hoax. I don't think that these people somebody could have dreamed this up back in 1897. And one of the biggest reasons is because there was a grave. I mean, I can't imagine the people of this little Christian church in Aurora, Texas, back in 1897 would become part of this scheme. Apparent scheme, according to debunkers and skeptics. The scheme was that if you put a story like this in the newspaper, this will cause a whole bunch of people to come to the town. I don't think that that's what it was. I can't see that being the case. I can't imagine people in a church actually desecrating this local cemetery by putting in a phony grave with a phony alien creature in it. I just can't imagine it. But there was something buried there. It was a small grave, and there was a little headstone down there. As of 1973, a partial headstone. Part of it was broken off, and it had a carving on there of what looked like some kind of a craft, like a cigar-shaped craft. And I just can't see those people, the townsfolk, going along with something like this. And Mars actually interviewed different people throughout his life. There was somebody he interviewed in 1973 who was like 12 years old at the time when this incident happened, and he said he actually saw the thing. He was working in a field right next to Aurora with his father, and he saw the object flying over, and then they heard an explosion, and his father went into town the next day and found out all about it, and he came back and he told his son about it, and there was something that crashed there, and they're gonna it blew up. It hit something blew up over the judge's property. And they were looking at the strange metal. There was metal that was found there. It was a grade of aluminum that would have been virtually impossible to make back at that time. Some of it was embedded in rocks in the trees. I mean, it was all over the place, and people have found this, and people knew about this growing up. There was people that grew up in the 50s and 60s who said that their grandparents and great grandparents were telling them stories about when this event happened. Everyone knew about it. Kids would go visit the graveyard to see the aliens' grave site when they were kids growing up. I mean, this is something that apparently happened. And it's just, I think because of all the other stories at the time, and the day this story appeared in the Dallas Morning News, there was 16 other stories about airships sightings. And this one was buried in the middle of them. And I just think that, I think when it happened, I don't think these people knew how to handle it. I don't even think they even thought about contacting anyone. Who do we contact to tell? If it was a hoax, you think they would have been doing that. You think they would have been contacting someone to say, hey, you better come and check this out. But no, nothing ever happened. I just can't imagine people of that time frame doing something like this, particularly burying something, creating a fake grave, desecrating a cemetery to do something like this in an effort to draw people to the town. I just can't imagine the Christian church there, this local Christian church, doing something being part of something like that. So that's one of the biggest things I have. But you look at the other thing was some of the people who grew up with this. They told Jim Mars things like, the body that they found, they said it was a small man. Whatever this was a small man. You know, that's how they described it. And doesn't that jibe with what we find out years later? You know, when people start encountering these beings, a lot of them are short creatures with big heads. Whatever this was, they looked at it and they realized whatever was left of it, that this isn't somebody from Earth. The only thing they could do was, bury it. As far as they were concerned, the craft blew up. The creature that was operating is dead. What else could we do? I guess we just give it a Christian burial and just move on with our lives. This is what it is, and what else can you do about it? I think that's what happened. I think that this thing really did happen. I don't think it was a hoax. There's really been no evidence, actually, that's ever emerged to definitively show that it's a hoax. I mean, there were people who would say that, it was a hoax that was dreamed up by S.E. Hayden and other people in the town, but they don't have any evidence other than just hearsay. But meanwhile, there were actually a couple of people who were witnesses, like this one old guy that Mars had talked to. He was there. He actually saw the craft when it was floating into town. I just think that it was something that really happened. And the one problem I have with the article was when he talks about the papers. It says papers found on his person, evidently the record of his travels, are written in some unknown hieroglyphics. Now the hieroglyphics is really interesting because you think about all these other cases with alleged crashes, like the Roswell incident, or how many others where you hear people talk about hieroglyphics. The Rendlesham Forest incident. I mean, there were people looking at hieroglyphics written on the craft itself. Now, he describes it as papers found on the person. I can't imagine that an alien creature would be carrying paper like this kind of paper, right? So I don't buy that part, but there might have been something else. Maybe pieces of metal or something had hieroglyphics on it. Who knows? But I think that's probably more likely. But yeah, I think that most certainly something happened there, and this is a case that is just fascinating to me. I think what could have been the author of this article. I'm sure that he wrote the article, he submitted it, and it was looked at by an editor. I don't know if there was any other contact. I mean, via telegram back and forth saying, "Are you sure about this?" There might have been. We don't know. That's the part where we don't have any information. I mean, you would have to think there would be some back and forth here. I mean, if you're an editor at a newspaper and you receive a piece like this, I mean, you're going to want to question it before you go publishing it, right? I mean, you're saying you actually have the proof there. I mean, all these other stories back then were just people seeing the airships, or even sometimes people actually saw the occupants of the airships and even talked with them. There was stories like that. I think a lot of those stories were probably hoaxes for sure, right? But I think some of them were definitely real. Some people were actually really seeing things back then. And then some people just thought, hey, other people decided, we're just going to do a hoax and pretend we saw something and tell the newspaper about it. But I don't think this one would have been that. I think that you would have, the editor, whoever was responsible for putting together the Dallas Morning News back then, would have looked at this, and there would have been some telegrams going back and forth to Hayden saying, are you sure about this? And Hayden would have been, yes, I'm sure about it. I mean, there would have had to been some back and forth. I mean, editor's not just going to publish something like this back in 1897. No, I think there would have had to been more communication going on with the reporter at the time too. Hayden was what you consider a stringer, a correspondent, someone who, just submits articles, sends them off, probably at that time via telegram, or some other, or by mail, right? One or the other. But I would imagine this was probably sent, probably either by mail or by telegram. This article, and it ended up getting published in that newspaper. And there would have definitely, most certainly, been questions posed by the people who ran the newspaper. Are you sure about this? And then they ran it, and then that was it. I guess back then maybe they're looking at it like, well, okay, I guess that's all we could do. What else? There's nothing else we could do. The thing's dead, so we can't talk to him. Even if it is a guy from another world, he's dead. There was only a little bit of him left, and they're burying him in the local cemetery. So what are we going to do? And the ship blew up, so we're never going to figure out, what it was or how it operated, because there's nothing left of it. It's all blown to pieces. So let's just throw all this metal down into this old well here where it blew up, and let's bury this spaceman with some more of this metal up in the local cemetery, and we'll call it a day, and we'll move on with our lives. I think that's probably what happened. I don't think these people even wanted to think about it. I think that they probably scared the hell out of them. I mean, think of it. You probably would. If this happened, okay, it happened. There it is. What are you going to do? Let's just I'll run an article in the Dallas Morning News, and I'll send a follow-up piece off to the Fort Worth Register, and we'll just all move on with our lives because the thing died, the ship blew up, there's not much more we can do, and probably no one's going to believe us anyway. Let's just run the news as it is, and we'll move on with our lives. That could be what happened here. Not, hey, let's try to get people to come to Aurora, Texas, because it's a dying town. Like this, this is what the skeptics will tell you. The debunkers will say, oh yeah, the town was dying, and so they come up with this big scheme of a airship crash and a dead alien creature. I mean, the imagination here, I just can't see it. I mean, because it does jibe with crashes that happen later on. The hieroglyphics, the little man, all of it. I mean, to me, I think that this most certainly happened. The more and more you think about it. But the biggest part to me is the fact that it was allowed. If it would have been a hoax, then that means that the people who the church-going people of Aurora, Texas at the time were willing to create a false grave for this being, and I just don't see that happening. Of course, it's unfortunate what did happen later on in 1973 when this started becoming a big story again. When Bill Case and Jim Mars were investigating this back in 1973, there was discussion about exhuming the grave. And it's a shame that wasn't allowed to happen by the Cemetery Association back in 1973 because, wow, I mean, you could have had the proof of a dead alien corpse, the bones of an alien body. It could have possibly, we don't know. But apparently the people in that town did not want any graves being dug up. So they actually guarded it with police officers and everything for a couple of weeks. When the discussion of the potential exhumation came up, the people in the town got upset about this, and so they were guarding the cemetery every night to make sure that nobody went in there to try to dig it up. And then after a couple of weeks, they stopped doing that. And then lo and behold, somebody snuck in there and they stole the headstone that had the carving of the ship on it. And then Bill Case discovered shortly thereafter that somebody drilled holes where the grave was. And previously he had used a metal detector, and the metal detector showed that there was metal buried in the grave, and now all of a sudden there was no metal in the grave. The metal detector showed nothing. Somebody had drilled holes where the grave was, and using some sort of vacuum technology sucked up everything that was there, probably the bones along with it. But it's a shame that they weren't able to dig that up at the time, because that might have offered the proof at that time in 1973. Bill Case told Jim Mars that he thought it was the government that was responsible for digging it up, for digging the holes and drilling the holes and stealing the metal and possibly the remains. We'll never know. We'll never know. It's really unfortunate. It really is truly unfortunate. But the bottom line is, I think that this event happened. You know, people that were living in that, who ended up buying Judge Proctor's property in 1945, they were drinking from that well. A lot of those, two of those people ended up getting really bad cancer. And they think it was from the metal. They think the metal was radioactive. Really, really don't know. I mean, we have no proof of that. But the proof that we do have is that something did crash there. You know, now some of the other aspect of this story that was that Mars figured out later on was that it wasn't actually a windmill. It was a windlass that was used to as a sump pump for the well. That's what got destroyed. It was an 18-foot tall construction. That's what the thing ran into. Not a windmill precisely, but a windlass. So that's what was destroyed. But yeah, I think that this story most certainly. I think to me, I just can't imagine it being made up. For another thing I want to point out is that it was in April of 1897 when H.G. Wells started serializing his War of the Worlds novella. Right, it was serialized in a magazine over in England. Nobody in America even knew about it in April of 1897. They didn't know about that book. That book talked about, of course, Martians, and they were tentacled creatures with, you know, they were something that you would think of, that you would see like in a 1950s science fiction movie, what H.G. Wells dreamed up for the creatures. And I don't think that the people in that town could have drummed up this story, and I just don't see it. I just don't believe it. And on top of it, I just don't think that the people who operated that church would allow a phony grave. I just can't see it. That would go against their beliefs. I just don't see that happening. So I think this did happen, and I don't. It's unfortunate. You know, too bad nobody took any pictures. That's a shame. You would have thought that somebody back then would have had the foresight to take a couple of pictures of the being itself before they buried it. That would have been nice to have that, at least. But nobody did. I think probably what happened, again, like I stated earlier, I think that people were scared about what happened, and they just wanted to get it over with, bury it, and move on with their lives. And that's just how they how they would have dealt with it, I think, in 1897. I don't think it was any sort of giant hoax to draw travelers and visitors to the town. Although nowadays people do go there to Aurora, ironically, just because of this reason. They want to go visit the graveyard where the being was buried, and there is a monument there now. There's a plaque there that talks about it. You can see that. It would be something to see. Hopefully I'll get to go there someday. I would like to visit Aurora and see it with my own eyes. Talk to some of the people there about the story. I think it's fascinating, and I think it is most certainly something that really did happen, because I don't believe that these people could make up a story like this. I just don't believe it, especially considering the fact that there was a grave dug for this creature. I just don't. So I think it did happen just as this article stated for the most part. Anyway, I want to say this. I want to say thank you all for joining me today. Until next time.